It is possible to overcome the energy crisis in South Africa and build a sustainable energy future. Solutions do exist, and some are leading the way. South Africa is in the midst of a landmark power crisis which has resulted in devastating short term and long term effects on South Africa's economy and its people. With increased load shedding and the rising and crippling cost of electricity, municipalities play an integral role in helping to resolve the energy crisis by providing alternative, innovative solutions to allow the South African electricity supply industry and their economies to regain lost ground and hopefully put the country on a path to accelerated economic growth. The South African landscape and electricity supply industry is changing rapidly, and as the market evolves, the incentive for municipalities to procure their own power becomes more evident. Decarbonisation owing to climate change is a key motivation to transition to green energy, but as electricity costs accelerate and load shedding increases, municipalities are forced to future-proof their strategies in order to provide access to affordable, sustainable energy for all. In this Future Cities Africa episode, we first look at how the city of Ekurhuleni is dealing with the energy crisis, whereafter we take a look at the transformation of the electricity supply industry in South Africa. My guests today are Hendrik Raidani, Divisional Head of Alternative and Renewable Energy at the City of Ekurhuleni, and James Beattie, Chief Executive Officer at Npower Trading. Hendrik, welcome. It's great to have you on the show. What is the City of Ekurhuleni's vision to secure affordable, green, and sustainable energy for all?
As the city, we've actually put things on our IDP, actually with the goal of trying, maybe before I can even speak of sustainability, but now just to have an energy generation station in Ekurhuleni. As you know, we are surrounded by municipalities like your city of Tshwane, City Power, where traditionally they also run their own, generation station. But these are historical, issues. But now for City of Ekurhuleni, being the industrial hub of the country, we don't have such, right? So now the idea at first was just to develop our own generation capacity. But now over the years, obviously that has now been taken over by having something renewable. So now we as a city we've actually approved it's an energy and climate change response strategy where we actually plan that at least by 2030, 30% or 30 to 40% of our supply should come from renewable. And at least by 2050, we are aiming to get around 50% of our supply coming from renewable. So as a city, we've got almost 56 ESCOM intake points, and then that totals to around 2.5 gigawatts of demand that we get from ESCOM. So from that, we definitely want to reduce that at least by 40% renewable. So that is how the city plans to remain sustainable as well. So as we all know that now most industries again in Ekurhuleni, they also do have their own green energy sustainability energy targets. So we also try to also assist them with that, because sometimes we also do get calls from companies requesting, Hendrik, how much of your supply is renewable. So now if the cities within Ekurhuleni are able to leverage our own sustainability goals, then that's good for us. And then again, that is the only way we can remain sustainable in this changing environment. So yeah, I think that is our aim, and that is our vision. And then we've actually put that into practice where in 2017 we have actually appointed around 47 independent power producers who are actually going to sell the renewable or clean energy to the city just below 700 megawatts. So that was actually the total megawatts that now we proposed on our first bid window of independent power producers. So we've done that. And again, recently, we've actually advertised a request for proposal to actually supplement or to in addition to our first bid window for IPPs. So that tender RFP was actually published last week on Friday. And then the tender documentation definitely will be uploaded on our website. So that is actually in our drive to push the targets that we've put forth for our city. So that is a vision of Ekurhuleni where we actually want to remain sustainable. And then we realize that if we don't do that, unfortunately, the market is changing at a rapid pace and they will be left behind. So we also still want to protect our business as well, as we know that most of our revenue that we derive as a municipality, it comes from the sale of electricity. And then, but now we then need to remain sustainable so that we safeguard that market share of selling our electricity to our customers. So that is a vision of Ekurhuleni in terms of staying, sustainable and also adapting to the current changes in the environment and in the whole value chain.
Please may you summarize the municipality's energy strategy both in the short and in the long term.
We do also have our own, I'll say maybe short term strategy. We also have got our own small scale generation where we basically develop our own generation plants for own use. If you walk around City of Ekurhuleni, especially across most customer care buildings, you realize that now we've maximized the roof space there where we install our solar PVs. But that is just for our own consumption, not necessarily to supply or feed onto the grid. So I think more in the short term is to actually make sure that all our buildings we are able to supply renewable or clean energy to all our operations. In that case, we are reducing the demand from the grid, and then again, we also then generate our own electricity for sale, to our customers. So that's more on the medium term, and then the long term strategy. Obviously, the as I've alluded on the first question, we have appointed around 47 and also going to increase the number of IPPs. So that's more long-term strategy in terms of energy generation, also energy security, where we actually want to sort of like reduce the reliance, that we have from the national grid. As we all know, I mean, it's common knowledge, the problems that our national grid is facing. So now we also then want to reduce that burden that we put as the city. I've indicated around 2.5 gigawatts. So we also want to reduce that a strain from the national grid where we can develop and generate for ourselves and also sell to our customers. So long term, obviously, in terms of generation, these are long term power purchase agreements that we have signed, but we are also still going to sign with our appointed power producers. And then these are 20-year power purchase agreements. So you can clearly see that's more, of a long term. So as I've indicated, we are saying at least by 2050, our supply should be around 50% should come from independent producers. And then you can clearly see that's more of a long-term strategy. So I think in short, I think that's where we want to place ourselves as city. As I've indicated before, we also then want to remain sustainable. We understand that most companies, especially even here in Ekurhuleni, most companies are going basically they're installing their own alternative power sources. And then what that means, it means that now you end up having a declining revenue margin. So basically, electricity that we used to sell to them now becomes less because now they are generating by themselves. So now it then leaves the municipality in a bit of a dilemma. So look, the revenue that we used to generate from selling electricity, we can't generate the same. Then what is the next business model for municipalities? In this case, that's when now we look at issues of trying to position the municipality as a grid service provider, meaning that now that's when we now talk of the issue of wheeling, where we then allow private companies to wheel energy across our grid, and then in that way we are trying to put a correlate to actually basically make the city more sustainable in trying to adapt to the changing environment, because we cannot stop it. I mean, people are going to install their own alternative power generation. Then we just need to position the city in such a way that we are still relevant, even in the changing electricity space. So I think that's, in short, that's more of our strategies in trying to remain relevant in this space.
Can you highlight some priorities or programs implemented to enable and drive change within the energy system?
Number one, Obviously, as I've indicated, there's a change within the municipality, as I have indicated, the issue of us generating our own electricity, meaning that now all our operations, all our customer care buildings, we try to, provide or generate our own, power for our own usage. So that is more change internally. And then also following or implementing our energy efficiency, initiatives, and you're just trying to be more efficient in our energy use. And then obviously externally, now we then need to incorporate customers. As I've indicated, we've got the residential customers, we've got industrial customers that are installing their own embedded generation. So that is another way where we are trying to accommodate change, where we create an enabling environment, for customers, special businesses to connect, the embedded generators. And in this case, currently we've got around over almost 200 megawatts of installed capacity. This is just from the businesses and restaurant customers who've got their own embedded generators, and mainly in the form of solar PV. So now we've created that framework where we try to integrate them onto the network. And then again, subsequent to that, that also we have then developed your feeding tariffs, where we then allow, people or industries that can actually generate excess from the embedded generators, feed that onto the grid. And of course, we can also compensate for that. So I think that's another way of trying to, to accommodate the changes. And then, as I've also indicated, there's also the concept of wheeling, that as the city we have actually sort of like, how can I put it? We've tried to actually incorporate that on our business strategy. So look, we then can open our grid for private generators to wheel power across our grid and to supply to their end users. So in that way, we are also trying to accommodate the changing, landscape in the energy sector. So yeah, I think in brief, those are some of the initiatives that we are trying to put, in trying to accommodate change. Maybe again, I just also want to repeat the issue of IPPs, where we then are going to be contracted with IPPs, enter into long-term contracts, buy power directly from them, as opposed to buying power from ESCOM. So in that case, in that way, we are trying to accommodate change, and those are the strategies that we've put in place, in trying to adapt to the current changing environment.
The only way to ensure the security of energy supply and eliminate load shedding over time is to get more generation online. Electricity generation by the private sector is more accessible than ever and provides an opportunity to generate utility scale electricity quickly. How is the city creating an enabling environment for the private sector that is mutually beneficial to both the municipality and the private sector?
We do have that drive, internally as a city, to actually purchase power from these private power producers. As I've indicated, that now we had our first bid window of proposals, where we appointed 47 IPPs to sell electricity directly to the city. And then I've indicated that now we are actually hoping to get around just below 700 megawatts of renewable clean energy from the private sector. And this includes technologies like solar, your gas, your waste to energy projects. So that is on one hand. And then again, there's then the issue of wheeling, where we also then are trying to open our grid. We have got a developed wheeling framework, where we then are opening our grid, for wheeling. So in that case, we are then now allowing the private sector, to play a role, within Ekurhuleni, and then either selling power directly to the city, or using our grid, as I've indicated, that now we then want to position our grid, basically our business model, in such a way that now we become the grid service provider. So in that case, it means that wheeling, we then enable wheeling, for private IPPs to wheel their power across our grid or across ESCOM onto their off-takers, which is mainly our our customers that we currently serve.
What prompted the municipality to decide in principle to open up to electricity wheeling?
We just need to admit that in most cases, the private sector drives change in most cases, right? And I'm not gonna say it was anything different from Ekurhuleni. Even with wheeling, the private sector drove the change. The same thing with IPP selling to the city. It was also again the private sector driving that change because now it normally starts from the private sectors making inquiries, right? Ekurhuleni, can we do wheeling? Ekurhuleni, can we? I want to develop a solar plant. Can I sell to the city? So that actually is a start, more in most cases, a start point where internally then we start putting things, systems in place in trying to accommodate what the private sector is seeking to do. As much as we might have plans as well, but I think the drive comes from the public sector, I mean, so from this private sector where at least we know that there is a market for it and then we can go out and we can do RFPs because we know already there's an existing market. So I think for Ekurhuleni, the change came mainly, the drive was mainly from the private sector, where you understand that with any change, it's not always easy to implement because obviously when it's a distraction to the norm. So now that distraction to the norm, obviously people are more skeptical, especially obviously in municipality we are more skeptical to just accept it and allow it to happen because now, as I've indicated, as the city, we are also in the business of selling electricity, right? We derive almost 86, I mean, between 60 to 80% of our revenue we derive from the sale of electricity. So, but now if there's something coming in, a new concept, which is actually potentially, challenges, or actually threaten, that business model, obviously there might be some resistance. So I think for us, at first, obviously, there was that resistance, obviously, because due to lack of knowledge. But as time goes on, knowledge increase, you start to see things differently and then accept and acknowledge that the market is changing. And then as the city, we just need to position ourselves in such a way that we adapt or else we are left behind. So I think that is what pushed, the municipality to actually accept this new concept in the market, to realize that no, if we don't do that, unfortunately, we might also end up losing that which we're trying to protect. Let me just give you an example of wheeling. We've got a lot of couple of data centers in the Ekurhuleni, and you'll find that now most of them they will have these sustainability goals. They will have these green energy targets. So look, by 2030, I need to receive 30% or 50% of my supply from renewable. By 2050, I must be 100%. So now those are very ambitious targets and a bit, difficult task, I mean, targets to meet. So now then they approach us to say, look, we've got this, we've got international, footprint, we've got these international partners who can only invest in us, if we transition to low carbon operations, right? So now as the city, what can we do? Can we create an enabling environment? Because now, if we do that for us, it was also more of a trade off. So it's fine. We might not be selling enough, I mean, the same units that we used to sell to this company, but now that company will remain invested in the city. That's number one. So now, if they're not going to get new investment because we are blocking wheeling, it means that they close doors, people lose jobs. So that which we're trying to protect, we might end up losing all of it totally. So let's have some trade-offs. Yes, we might not sell much electricity as we used to before, but that company will remain invested in the city. There will be more development, more people will still be employed, assessment rates will still be paid, other services will be paid by the same company. So I think that's how we then allowed especially the issue of Williams. So look, let's look at it holistically. Let's not only look at it that maybe we might lose a potential revenue. We might lose it, but there are so many gains, there are socio-economic benefits that the city benefits for having those companies remaining invested in the city. So that's what drove this change and the acceptance that look, we need to accept this new market concepts.
What are some of the key challenges experienced and what is preventing growth?
there are different willing scenarios, all right? And then maybe for the benefit of this interview, I'm only going to concentrate on two willing scenarios, right? As you know that now most municipalities, let me just say, yeah, most municipalities, we get electricity from ESCOM in bulk, right? Then we distribute, and that's where we get our markup. So now you might find that there's a willing scenario where there is a customer here in Ekurhuleni, all right? And then that customer requests to actually receive wheeled power from a generator which is somewhere in the Northern Cape, all right? Because that's where most of the PV generators are. Find that now the generator is in the Northern Cape and the customer is here in Ekurhuleni. Obviously, technically and physically, there's no any connection between the two generator and the customer. So in that case, it will mean that now the generator will connect onto the ESCOM grid, where that generator is developed, and then it would then mean that now ESCOM will then need to transfer or credit those units, whatever the power that is generated on the other side, over to Ekurhuleni, and Ekurhuleni will then have to pass it down to the customer. So now that is one willing scenario. And then the second one is when the generator is within Ekurhuleni and the customer is in Ekurhuleni, but probably not in the same area. Maybe one is in the generator is in Binoni and the customer is in Sando, in Kempton Park. So that's more, we call it more of an internal wheeling. So now the challenges on both. Maybe the first one, there was an issue of the security deposits. Maybe before I speak of the security deposit, there isn't a national wheeling framework. Also, I think I think that's a good starting point. There isn't a national wheeling framework, meaning that now each municipality or any utilities, we are kind of like basically developing your own strategies, your own framework, without necessarily having some form of guidelines, maybe from NERSA, from DMRE. So basically creating your own framework without that guidance. So I think in that case, so there are a lot of uncertainties, a lot of questions. So now each and every utility, you end up doing your own wheeling based on how you understand the concept. So I think that is a first, bit of a challenge that there is in the national wheeling framework. And then again, on that first wheeling scenario where the generator is outside of Ekurhuleni connected to the ESCOM grid, there was a point where ESCOM was actually requesting security deposits because, as I've indicated, ESCOM and Ekurhuleni would then have to change their existing supply agreement. And for that, ESCOM was requesting security deposits. So look, if we are going to do this transaction, the municipality, we need to basically update or pay a security deposit because now we are changing the supply agreement. And any change to the supply agreement, ESCOM and Ekurhuleni, it triggers a security deposit. And we are talking billions. For Ekurhuleni, we did our estimations. If we were to receive wind power across all our 56 ESCOM intake points, we are looking at around 6 billion, which is something that it's a no-brainer. It's not something that we can even do. I mean, we don't even have that kind of cash lying around that we can even do that. So I think that was one of the hurdles when it comes to external wheeling. But on that one, at least what is good is that now ESCOM was also open for engagement. We sat down with ESCOM, we engaged with ESCOM, and then to a point where it was agreed that only for wheeling, ESCOM will not require any municipality. Basically, it was Ekurhuleni, but they will not require Ekurhuleni to pay the security deposit. And then, however, they will also try to use that very same resolution across the country, meaning that now all municipalities, because these are the same across the country. So, but based on the resolution that we took during the meeting, that was also going to be extended across the country, meaning that now companies can now, or IPPs can now wheel across ESCOM to municipalities without any security deposit being requested by ESCOM, provided that now that municipality is in good financial standing with ESCOM, meaning that they're paying their account monthly, and then there are no issues there. So that is a positive. So it's no longer a stumbling block, but it was a stumbling block for the longest time. But at least it's good to report that now that is no longer the issue. Now, coming to the internal wheeling, as I've indicated that as the city, we've got our own plans, to purchase power from independent power producers. And then our drive is to actually have these IPPs building their plants in Ekurhuleni and connecting Ekurhuleni. so that at least jobs are created here locally, because that's one of our socioeconomic, responsibilities that we also need to look at. So now the problem that we are picking up is that now you find that now we've got our own program where our own appointed independent power producers and the private power producers who wants to win using our grid, they're all competing for the same connection points. And now that becomes a problem. And with us, obviously, we'll always choose, the IPPs that we appointed, that we are legally, we have signed, the contract. And it is something that we have planned from 2016. Definitely, we cannot now prioritize this new private wheeling. So I think the internal program, that is the only challenge. But where we said maybe for now, we're just simply going to temporarily, not necessarily close it. Yeah, let me use that word close it, temporarily suspend, private wheeling within Ekurhuleni up until all our independent power producers connects. Then, if there is then spare capacity, loading and all that, then we can then open our grid for private wheeling. So I think that is a bit of a challenge, for somebody who really wants to wheel, within the city of Ekurhuleni grid.
James, welcome. It's great to have you on the show again. What value does the trader bring in trying to accelerate new generation capacity onto the national and municipal grids?
The key with the trading solution is that you are providing more liquidity in the marketplace, and you're providing what's a private system, really, right? So what does that do? It underpins the bankability for the construction of new power assets, right? So whether those new power assets are independent power producers, IPPs outside of the local municipalities, so in places like the Northern Cape or other parts of South Africa where our renewable resource is the best in the country, you are aggregating together offtake downstream inside a municipality that is underpinning the transaction or the construction of these new assets, right? So you mentioned outside or inside of a municipality. This goes for both, frankly. So if you've got willing buyers with a good and sound business model that are located somewhere inside a municipality that want to source cleaner, more affordable power from an SSEG site or embedded generator somewhere else inside that same municipality. Take out George, proven track record as an example. That's possible with a traded solution. So it's an embedded asset. It's supplying customers inside a municipality with this cleaner, more affordable power. Alternatively, you're able to, as I said, underpin the bankability for the construction of a larger asset, potentially externally in places like the Karoo or others. So it really comes down to, I think, the nature of the fact that this is a private system, right? You've got private business that's able to put up the relevant kind of bankability that underpins these transactions, and have the construction of these power assets then happening after that. So I think the trading system is the glue that connects all of this together, right? It's the glue that binds a buyer and a seller together. So the seller being possibly an IPP, or a buyer being the offtake. We are binding the system or the supply chain together, right? And connected to that is, of course, this concept of energy blending. So, energy blending is, of course, having more than one IPP. A traded solution would be blending solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, etc. That package of renewable blended power to supply these customers. So again, that's very important for municipalities because it's offering a competitive product into the municipal networks, which I think is very important. So yeah, that's my response to that.
James, how is a trader able to aggregate different energy sources in order to increase a municipality's renewable energy penetration?
Aggregation is, of course, just the binding together of different sources, really. And in this instance, we're talking about sources of supply. So we're talking about different power plants around South Africa. It could be embedded inside a municipality or externally. But what we're saying is that the trading model and the trading system is able to contract with more than one IPP, right? So more than one supplier. Let's take a simple example to keep it easy for understanding. if we are signing an offtake contract with one solar generator, and they're in the Northern Cape, and then we're signing another PPA with a wind generator, a wind farm that's in eastern part of South Africa, right? So the Eastern Cape or other. With those two profiles added together, you are obviously creating an aggregate profile, right, of renewable energy. And of course, as last time I checked, and you all know, the wind often blows when the sun's not shining, right? So the renewable profile of solar looks something like this, as you can imagine. Peaks in the middle of the day when the sun's at its highest, and then fades out towards the end of the day. And that's the same thing every single day. Obviously, summer and winter adjustments included. And then, of course, a wind profile is subject to a very different profile. In fact, in South Africa, many parts of the country, it's actually quite windy at nighttime. So you're getting green, clean and more affordable power that's being generated at the night, outside of hours where the sun is shining, right? So what the trading solution is doing is it's adding those two profiles of green together, if that makes sense. That's a very simplistic example of it, but that is essentially what's happening. Blending those kilowatt hours together that are both green and at different times of the day, and creating an aggregate profile, which we then propose or supply to customers downstream, whether those be large power users, whether they be private buyers inside the municipality, etc. But it's giving an access to this more full renewable profile, right? What's called the penetration, actually, in the terminology. So, just to give you some examples, if someone inside a municipality wants a rooftop solar solution, typically you're able to get or achieve what's approximately 20 to 30% renewable penetration for your energy for an on-site solution, right? You're able to pure solar, wheeling it from other parts of South Africa. As you can imagine, if the solar is coming from the Karoo, there's more sun there than there is, for example, in Newlands or in George, or in obviously parts of Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni, etc., and COJ. You're able to get with that. So if you're wheeling from the Karoo, just solar alone, something like 50% renewable penetration, right? So you've already seen an optimization there. And a common misconception is that wheeling's competing with on-site solar. If you think about it, many companies could do on-site for their first 30%, and then they can get an incremental 20% from the wheeled solution. Right? So it's actually a complementary solution. But coming back to your question, the topic of blending. So we would say that the 50% would be coming from the wheeled solution. We'd add on top of that wind, and you're able to get up to something like 80%. We've even seen solutions where we can get to 100% renewable energy supply with just solar and wind blended together. So that's very powerful and important because, of course, the value propositions of that for customers across the spectrum are enormous. Big corporates want to avoid carbon to the extent they can. And of course, you have local industries and private buyers who actually, for personal reasons, want to be greener. So I think that's an important value proposition of the traded product. It's blending these different sources of renewable energy together via aggregation. Thank you.
Exactly how is a municipality's revenue protected through wheeling?
Municipal revenue is protected through wheeling via a tariff construct, if we can call it that, called revenue surplus neutrality. For those who understand the formulas in the South African power space, it's really just your retail electricity price minus your WEPS price, right? That's actually the amount of, let's call it, power revenue that goes to municipalities, right? It's the difference between the WEPS price and the end user customer price. We're saying that amount remains constant at all times. So municipalities remain revenue surplus neutral, whether there's a trader in their network or not. So currently that's literally how municipalities recover revenues from power-related activities. Is, if you think about it, the wholesale cost of electricity, the markup on top of that, you ends up being the retail cost price for electricity in the country, right? So the municipality is selling at this price and they're buying at this price. This difference over here is what goes to municipality, right? And that remains constant. So it's called revenue surplus neutrality. And that is a construct that, a lot of the wheeling tariffs in the country are actually now being modeled on. NERSA is obviously, looking through that and looking at a harmonized kind of, tariff approval for wheeling. And that's what the premise is. We as Empower Trading actually based our business model on that pricing construct. So municipalities always remain revenue surplus neutral, and it's super important because, of course, municipalities have been fearful in many instances. They're collecting 25%, if not in some cases more than 50% of their revenues come from power supply. So we are extremely cognizant about preserving that value for municipalities. And as mentioned earlier in the episode, we think that let's call it the odds of customers remaining on these networks is a lot higher with a traded solution, because of course it avails a cleaner, more affordable, competitive solution on the network. So not only are customers incentivized to stay on the network, but municipalities will also therefore continue to receive revenue in a neutral way with all the other ancillary sort of commercial benefits of that system on their network. So I think hopefully that maths isn't too tricky, but that's the way I would describe that, as municipalities continue to receive their same revenues corresponding to power, whether there's a wheeler or a trader in their network or not.
James, how should municipalities go about future-proofing their services to allow for local economic development?
For me, it really boils down to the customer, right? What do we mean by future-proofing? We mean that the networks need to continue to, operate in their current form and supply customers as they have been doing in the future, And I think for that to happen, given that there's increasing choice in the market, right, it really needs to pivot towards a focus on what customers want. Previously when regulation was different and customers didn't have as much choice to leave the network and build on-site solar or etc., I think there was more of a luxury of monopoly. Whereas now it's just a reality that the government and regulators have, in my view, moved in. It's a positive movement. They've allowed for different types of solutions for customers. No limits on self-supply, etc. I think what that has also then created, though, is it's created pressure on network owners and operators and suppliers to be competitive. Because without that, you've obviously got this risk of what we call off-grid flight, right? So customers taking it into their own hands, the power into their own hands, and leaving the networks, and that creates or accelerates the negative effect on municipalities that are at the moment under enormous pressure, which we understand. So what with that as the main factor, right? The customer being king. I think municipalities have to think about future-proofing with that in mind, right? And so we believe that future-proofing is obviously that we are part of that solution, right? So that a trading model is part of that solution. We've discussed grid centricity, opening up the network to private operators, private traders, private sector is part of that solution to mitigate off-grid flight, to provide a competitive solution to customers on the network so that they're incentivized to stay on that network rather than do something else. We think that's very important for future-proofing in the municipal space. What I would also say is, of course, that it's true we get asked quite a lot about this feels like a solution that could only really benefit bigger business in South Africa, your bigger companies, etc. And you spoke about local economic development. I think for me, what's very important is that we also have to remain, focused on the medium term, right? It's true that in the first instance, maybe the companies doing the deals or whoever in the first instance that might benefit directly are larger, bigger businesses, right? But we have to understand that in the medium term, this solution is general, right? Because the more companies that offtake this cleaner, more affordable power and facilitate the construction of new power assets in our country, the better it is for everybody, right? So if you think about it, the load shedding, is a function of there's not enough supply of power. So if we have, I think even the Vodacom CEO spoke about this the other day, 100 companies, as an example, that underpin 100 megawatts of new 10 times 100 megawatts, sorry, 100 power plants of 100 megawatts, right? That's 10 gigawatts of new supply. So of course that's a maybe an optimistic scenario. But what that is showing you is that the private sector and business can help to underpin the grid for everybody, right? To help mitigate load shedding for everybody in the medium term. So I think with that in mind, it's very important to think about that. Of course, linked to local economic development. If you have a wheeling solution inside these municipalities, you are, as we said, mitigating off-grid flight. So preserving people's jobs, creating maybe jobs in areas of strengthening of the grid. So being able to I guess strengthen the job market locally in these networks, I think is super, super key. And of course, minimize kind of what we have seen, which is a big burden and pressure on local balance sheets in these municipalities. So I think that this is a force for good. It's always hard. There's always trade-offs and nothing is perfect. But we believe that on balance, that, privatizing or facilitating opening up of these networks is generally a force for good for everybody, right? And that's our strong belief.
A special thanks to Hendrik Raidani, Divisional Head of Alternative and Renewable Energy at the City of Ekurhuleni, and James Beattie, Chief Executive Officer at Empower Trading, for this insightful conversation on Future Cities Africa.